Hey, I'm going to try to be quick. It's hard for me. But I want to thank you all for being here, and I appreciate the wisdom that you have. I want to make, with all respect, a proposal. What if we, and it's sort of crazy, but what if we stopped saying imperialism? What if we stopped using the word imperialism altogether? And the basis for that proposal is the following supposition, which may or may not be true. And that supposition is this, that there's a fundamental difference between the political system of domination that was imposed by Great Britain or France during the 19th century and the system that the United States has consistently supported from Versailles onwards. The system that we see, I would argue, and this is just a supposition, that the system that's been advocated for by American governments fairly consistently from 1919 to the present is one that aims precisely to support sovereignty, to make people into nations, to create a system of nation states, independent, self-governing, that can have a relationship with the United States, right? So I think when we call it imperialism, we run some risks of distortion because it's not. It's a system of sovereignty, and I think I would propose that we call it that. I want to argue real briefly that when we talk about the system of sovereignty as imperialism, we tend to bias ourselves towards seeing the central dynamic as being a relationship between our central government, a government, and a people somewhere else. So it's a people-to-government relationship. When really, I would argue, what we're looking at is a series of government-to-government relationships. And when we see things in the way that I've described, that also biases our own reactions. It means that we tend to see our primary goal as being interaction with our government. Our goal is to stop our government from doing something bad. I would argue that this is actually not what, it certainly hasn't proven successful so far.
Okay.
And so with that I'll wrap. Thanks.
I wanted to pose this question to the entire panel. But it stems out of a couple observations that Adam made in his opening remarks at different points. The question is, if the working class in the U.S. does not benefit objectively, that is economically or otherwise, from U.S. imperialism, how is it that the working class, the same working class, identifies ideologically with U.S. imperialism?
Hi, there's so much to say and so many debates going on, but I'm going to try and just raise a couple of quick questions about the question of whether and how to support the Iraqi resistance and what the character of that is. Just on the question of self-determination, I would actually disagree with the concept that arms determine, who rules the day in a fight for self-determination. I think if you look at the situation in Iraq, you have a situation where the world's largest military power attacked a country with 280th its military spending.
Okay, let's just try to keep these to one question.
Okay, well, I'll speed up then. You have a situation in Iraq where 90% of Iraqis now say that their situation today is worse than it was under Saddam Hussein. You have broad popular support for the resistance, and that's the only reason that it's able to sustain itself. And it is a sad state of affairs when a group like the Iraqi Communist Party apologizes for this occupation, which has killed 655,000 Iraqis, and where somebody like Sadr is considered one of the most powerful figures on the ground because he actually mobilizes support. But we don't get to choose the conditions that we live in. We make our own history, but we don't get to choose the conditions of how we do that. So my questions that I'm left over with are, in this state of affairs, how is it that we can actually oppose the war without supporting the resistance? Who is it exactly that we think is going to come in and save the day and run things in Iraq and determine Iraq's future, if not the Iraqi people who are supporting a resistance, to stop the occupation? And the second question, just really quickly, I'm sorry, why on earth would we have to sacrifice any of our politics, any of our ideas about how society should be run, what kind of rights people should have in order to agree with the conclusion that most Iraqis have come to, that the pivotal thing is to get the U.S. occupying forces out of Iraq because it's slaughtering people and ruining people's lives day in and day out. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to ask a question that kind of picks up on this idea of sovereignty, and I want to ask, what relation should people who consider themselves leftists have towards institutions such as international law, and also to kind of relate this back to our contemporary situation, to talk about Noam Chomsky was brought up earlier as kind of a premier leftist in the world today, and he has said that the UN is kind of the best thing we have going, and I think we can take this "we" in the way that Danny Postal referred to it as. And Lenin, by contrast, and I think this really kind of articulates the difference between our moment and a moment prior, is he called the League of Nations, the predecessor to the UN, a den of thieves and their victims. And so I would like the panelists maybe to respond to that. Thank you.
My question is particular to the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, and I want to know if you consider that imperialist or not, and why.
My question maybe is at a bit of a different register than the more practical questions that have been given to the panel, and it's in the relationship between politics and economics. If one is saying that the U.S. invaded the Middle East because of oil, and basically what we're saying here is that the sort of capitalism determines politics, how could you explain the possibilities for your own politics? So that's...
Hi, my question involves the neocons. I just received an email the other day by Mazin Komsia claiming that the U.S. is involved in endless wars because of the neocons who are serving Israeli interests. And this is a quite common perspective on the left, and he even spoke about the collective Jewish pressure on Congress. So I'd like a theoretical discussion about the role of the neocons, and do you see an Israeli lobby as in any sense subverting U.S. national interests, as argued by Walt and Mearsheimer, who are not leftists? And the other final point is, would you agree that the left has been in retreat and defeat for a period of a generation, and to what do you attribute that, and is it in any respect the fault of the left?
I'd like to hear each of you situate contemporary imperialism as we see it today within the larger context of late-stage capitalism, and given changes in the nature of capitalism, if you accept that those changes are there in the last 20 years, what that says about contemporary imperialism as we understand it historically.
My question relates to the earlier question on the role of the UN, and that is, do you think that the UN mandated invasion and occupation of Afghanistan is imperialist?